Most people have heard the name. Very few actually understand the man behind it. Sun Tzu was a Chinese military general, strategist, and philosopher. He lived around 500 BC, during what's called the Warring States period in ancient China. A brutal time. Kingdoms were constantly at each other's throats. Alliances shifted overnight. Betrayal wasn't the exception, it was the norm. And survival wasn't guaranteed for anyone, not even kings.
In the middle of all that chaos, Sun Tzu sat down and wrote one book. Just one, The Art of War. And that single book changed everything. Now here's the thing. It wasn't just a military manual. It was a blueprint for thinking, for decision-making, for understanding power, people, and strategy at a level most will never reach. And what's truly wild about it? The book is over 2,500 years old, and it's still one of the most read, most quoted, most studied texts on the planet. Not just by generals or military leaders, by CEOs, by coaches, by athletes, by entrepreneurs, by leaders in virtually every field you can think of.
So why does it endure? Because Sun Tzu didn't just write about war. He wrote about human nature, about conflict, about how to win, not through brute force, but by outsmarting, outpositioning, and outthinking everyone around you. And that's exactly what makes him so relevant today. The battlefields have changed, but the principles, they haven't moved an inch. Sun Tzu wasn't interested in being the loudest voice in the room. He wasn't about ego or reckless aggression. He was about precision, clarity, control. He believed the greatest victory is the one that requires no battle at all. So when we talk about leadership through the lens of Sun Tzu, we're not talking about motivational quotes slapped on a poster. We're talking about real, tested, battle-hardened strategy, the kind that separates people who actually lead from those who just hold the title.
This is where Sun Tzu gets really interesting. And honestly, this is where most leaders fail. We're taught that leadership is about standing firm, being the rock, having a plan and sticking to it no matter what. Grit, determination, all those buzzwords.
But Sun Tzu looks at that and shakes his head. He argues that being a rock doesn't make you strong. It makes you a target. It makes you predictable. And in his world, if you're predictable, you're dead. Instead, Sun Tzu offers a different metaphor, water. He says, military tactics are like unto water, for water in its natural course runs away from high places and hastens downwards. Now, pause on that for a second. What is he actually saying here? He's pointing out that water never tries to smash through a mountain. It doesn't waste energy fighting gravity. It flows around, it finds the cracks, it seeks the path of least resistance. Sun Tzu explicitly warns against attacking strength. If your competitor or your enemy, or even a problem you're facing is solid and fortified, don't hit it head on. That's ego, that's foolish. He argues that a great leader acts like water by avoiding what is strong and striking what is weak. You flow into the empty spaces. You find the vulnerabilities. But there's a deeper layer to this water philosophy. It's about formlessness. Sun Tzu writes, water shapes its course according to the nature of the ground over which it flows. The soldier works out his victory in relation to the foe whom he is facing. See, a lot of leaders fall in love with their own plans. They spend months building a strategy. They have the PowerPoint deck, they have the roadmap. And when reality hits and the ground changes, they try to force their plan onto the world. They try to make the water flow uphill. Sun Tzu calls this a disaster. He insists that you must have no constant shape. Just because a tactic worked yesterday doesn't mean it'll work today. Actually, relying on past victories is dangerous. It makes you lazy. He warns, "Do not repeat the tactics which have gained you one victory, but let your methods be regulated by the infinite variety of circumstances." That is a hard pill to swallow. It means you have to be willing to kill your darlings. You have to be willing to look at a plan you spent 6 months working on, realize the market has shifted, and throw that plan in the trash immediately. The best leaders, according to Sun Tzu, are the ones you can't pin down. They adapt so fast that their opponents can't get a reading on them. If the enemy expects a frontal assault, Sun Tzu says to flow to the flank. If they expect speed, he suggests you slow down. If they expect you to hold territory, you vanish.
So, the takeaway isn't just be flexible. That's too soft. The takeaway is about survival through adaptation. Sun Tzu points out that the only constant in war, and in business, and in life, is change. There are no constant conditions, he says. If you are rigid, you break. But if you are like water, you adapt. You shift. You become whatever the situation demands you to be. And because you have no fixed shape, you cannot be broken. There is a trap in leadership that Sun Tzu identifies early on, and it's a dangerous one. It's the trap of the ego. We see it all the time. Leaders who want to be the hero. They want the headlines. They want the credit. They make moves just to look busy, or to look tough, or to look smart. But Sun Tzu warns against this in the strongest possible terms. He gives us a specific profile of the ideal leader. He says, "The general who advances without coveting fame and retreats without fearing disgrace is the jewel of the kingdom." Read that again. Advances without coveting fame. Sun Tzu argues that a real leader makes the right move simply because it is the right move, not because it will make them look good, not because it will get them a promotion, but because it is strategically necessary. They don't need the applause, they just need the result. But then he drops the other half of that thought. And honestly, this is the harder part. He says the great leader retreats without fearing disgrace. This is where most people fail, because sometimes the smartest strategic move is to back down, to pause, to walk away from a bad deal or a losing battle. But why don't leaders do it? Because they're terrified of looking weak. They're scared of the optics. They worry about their reputation. So what happens? They double down. They throw good money after bad. They sacrifice their team or their resources just to save face. Sun Tzu calls this out for exactly what it is, vanity. And he points out that vanity is a strategic liability. If your enemy knows you have a massive ego, they can use it against you. They can bait you into a fight you can't win just by bruising your pride. He argues that the leader who fears disgrace is easily manipulated. But the leader who doesn't care, the one who is willing to look like a loser today so they can win the war tomorrow, that person is untouchable. Sun Tzu says the only thing that should matter to a leader is the safety of their people and the success of the mission. That's it. Whose only thought is to protect his country and do good service for his sovereign. He's talking about a total lack of selfishness. And he doesn't frame this as a moral nice to have. He frames it as a hard, cold necessity for survival. If you are making decisions based on how history will write your biography, you are not focused on the reality in front of you. You're distracted. And in Sun Tzu's world, distraction leads to defeat. So he highlights a profound truth here. Real authority doesn't come from chest thumping. It comes from trust. And people trust a leader who proves through action that they care more about the collective win than their own personal glory. Sun Tzu calls this leader the jewel of the kingdom, not the hero, not the conqueror, the jewel, something rare, something precious. Because he knew, even 2,500 years ago, that leaders who can put their ego in the back seat are almost impossible to find. But when you do find one, you follow them because you know they aren't going to lead you off a cliff just to get their picture in the paper. Most people get this backwards. They obsess over the competition. They study their rivals. They watch what everyone else is doing. And they completely skip the most important step. Sun Tzu doesn't start with the enemy. He starts with you. He makes this famous statement, and you've probably heard it before. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. But here's what most people miss. Look at the order. He says, know the enemy and know yourself. But then he breaks it down even further. He says, if you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. Okay, so that's a 50-50 shot. Not great, but not hopeless either. But then, if you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. Every single one. So what's the real variable here? It's not the enemy, it's you. Self-knowledge is the baseline, the non-negotiable. Without it, nothing else works. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. Because knowing yourself, actually knowing yourself, that's one of the hardest things a leader will ever do. It means being brutally honest about your weaknesses, your blind spots, the areas where you're not as strong as you think you are. Sun Tzu argues that a leader who doesn't understand their own capabilities is already defeated before the battle even begins. You can have the best strategy in the world, the best team, the best resources. But if you don't know what you're working with, really know it, you're building on sand. And he's not just talking about strengths. That's the easy part. Everyone loves listing their strengths. He's talking about limitations. Where are you vulnerable? Where do you overextend? Where does your confidence become arrogance? See, Sun Tzu warns that self-deception is the most dangerous form of weakness because it's invisible. You can't fix what you refuse to see. And leaders, they're especially prone to this. Why? Because people around them stop telling them the truth. They get surrounded by agreement, by nodding heads, and slowly they lose touch with reality. So what does a real leader do? They audit themselves constantly. They ask the hard questions. Can I actually deliver on this? Do I have the resources, the skills, the people? Or am I just running on ego right now? Sun Tzu points out that this kind of self-awareness isn't a sign of weakness. It's the ultimate source of power. Because once you truly know yourself, your real strengths, your real limits, you can position yourself where you're strongest. You stop fighting battles you were never meant to win. You stop wasting energy on things that don't align with who you actually are. And that's the shift. That's the aha moment right there. Leadership doesn't start with a grand vision or a bold strategy. It starts in the mirror. Sun Tzu is essentially saying, before you try to read anyone else, learn to read yourself first, because a leader who is a mystery to themselves will always be an easy target for everyone else. Here's something that surprises a lot of people. Sun Tzu, a military strategist, a man literally writing about war, says the best victory is the one where you never have to fight at all. Think about that for a second. He puts it plainly. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting, not after fighting, not through fighting, without it. And this completely flips the script on what most people think leadership looks like. We've been conditioned to admire the leader who charges in, the one who dominates, who crushes the opposition. But Sun Tzu argues that's actually a failure of strategy. If you had to fight, something already went wrong. Why? Because fighting is expensive. It costs resources. It costs energy. It costs people. Even when you win, you lose something. And Sun Tzu is obsessed with efficiency. He doesn't want you to win ugly. He wants you to win smart. He says, in the practical art of war, the best thing of all is to take the enemy's country whole and intact. To shatter and destroy it is not so good. See what he's doing there? He's redefining what victory even means. It's not about destruction, it's about preservation. A real leader doesn't burn everything down to prove a point. A real leader wins and still has something left to build with. So, how do you actually win without fighting? Sun Tzu lays it out. You outthink, you outmaneuver, you outposition. You make the opposition realize that fighting you would cost them more than it's worth. You create a situation where the smartest thing they can do is stand down. And that takes more skill than any battle ever could. See, anyone can escalate. That's easy. Throwing punches, literal or metaphorical, doesn't take genius. But creating conditions where the conflict resolves itself, where the other side folds without you having to force them, that's mastery. Sun Tzu warns that leaders who rely on force are actually revealing their own limitations. They couldn't find a better way. They couldn't see a smarter path, so they defaulted to the blunt instrument. And yeah, sometimes it works, but at what cost? He points out that the leader who wins without fighting earns something that the aggressive leader never will. They keep their strength intact. Their team isn't exhausted. Their resources aren't drained. They're ready for the next challenge, and the one after that. This is what separates good leaders from great ones. Good leaders can win a fight. Great leaders make the fight unnecessary. And here's the part that really hits. Sun Tzu argues that this kind of leadership requires more courage, not less, because it means resisting the urge to react, to retaliate, to prove you're tough. It means having the discipline to pause when everything inside you wants to strike. That's not weakness. That's the highest form of control. So the next time you see a leader bragging about how they destroyed the competition, ask yourself, did they really win? Or did they just fight because they didn't know how to do anything else? Sun Tzu's answer is clear. The leader who never has to fight already won a long time ago. Sun Tzu says something that sounds almost tender for a military strategist. He says, "Regard your soldiers as your children, and they will follow you into the deepest valleys." That's powerful. A general talking about love, about care, about treating the people under you like family. But then he drops the other half, and this is the part people conveniently forget. He warns, if, however, you are indulgent but unable to make your authority, kind-hearted but unable to enforce your commands, then your soldiers must be likened to spoiled children, and they are useless for any practical purpose. Spoiled children, useless. That's not gentle anymore. That's a slap in the face. And that's exactly the point. Sun Tzu argues that leadership lives in this tension. You have to care, genuinely care about your people. But caring doesn't mean being soft. It doesn't mean letting things slide. It doesn't mean avoiding the hard conversations because you don't want to hurt someone's feelings. And this is where so many leaders get it wrong. They pick one side. Either they're the cold, demanding boss who rules through fear and wonders why nobody's loyal, or they're the nice, easygoing leader who wants to be liked and wonders why nobody respects them. Sun Tzu is saying you need both at the same time, and that's the paradox. He points out that when you truly care about your people, discipline isn't cruelty, it's love. Think about it. A parent who never corrects their child isn't being kind. They're being negligent. They're setting that child up to fail. Same thing with leadership. If you let your team get away with mediocrity because you want to be the cool leader, you're not helping them. You're failing them. But, and this is critical, Sun Tzu argues that the discipline has to come from a place of genuine investment. Your people need to feel that you're pushing them because you believe in them, not because you're on some power trip, not because you enjoy control. because you actually want them to be better. And when you get that balance right, something incredible happens. Sun Tzu says they'll follow you anywhere, into the deepest valleys, into the hardest challenges, through things they would never endure for someone who just barked orders at them. That's the difference. Fear can make people obey, but it can't make people fight for you. Not really. Sun Tzu understood that loyalty isn't demanded, it's earned. And you earn it by showing people that you see them, you value them, and you hold them to a high standard because of that value, not in spite of it. So here's the gut check for any leader. Are you being kind because you actually care, or because you're afraid of conflict? Are you being tough because it serves your people, or because it serves your ego? Sun Tzu warns that if you can't answer those questions honestly, you'll end up on one extreme or the other, too soft or too hard, and both lead to the same place, a team that can't perform when it matters most. The sweet spot, it's uncomfortable, it's messy, it demands that you hold two opposing things at once. But Sun Tzu argues that's exactly what real leadership is, not choosing between care and discipline, fusing them into something unbreakable. So here's something most people completely overlook about leadership: communication. Not just talking, not just giving orders, but the clarity of those orders. And Sun Tzu, he doesn't just mention this in passing, he makes it a cornerstone of effective command. See, Sun Tzu argues that when instructions are clear, genuinely clear, and soldiers still don't obey, that's on them. That's disobedience. But when instructions are muddled, vague, open to interpretation, and things fall apart, that's not on the soldiers, that's on the leader, every single time. And that distinction right there, that's everything. Think about it. How many times have you seen a boss get frustrated because the team didn't do what they were told? Happens all the time. But Sun Tzu would push back hard on that. He'd say, wait, did you actually make it clear? Did they truly understand what was expected? Or did you just assume they understood it because you understood it in your own head? Big difference. He warns that vagueness is not just a minor inconvenience. It's a threat, a real operational threat. Because when people don't know exactly what to do, they hesitate, they guess, they improvise in ways that don't align with the bigger picture. And now you've got chaos, not because your people are incompetent, but because you failed to communicate with precision. And here's where it gets really practical. Sun Tzu points out that a leader must use signals, commands, and systems that leave zero room for confusion. In his era, that meant drums, banners, flags, tools that cut through the noise of a battlefield. Today, that translates to clear KPIs, defined roles, written expectations, structured feedback. The tools have changed, the principle hasn't. But there's a deeper layer here too. Sun Tzu argues that clarity isn't just about efficiency, it's about trust. When a leader communicates clearly, people feel secure. They know where they stand. They know what's expected. And that security, it breeds confidence. Confident teams move faster. They commit harder. They don't second-guess every step. But when communication is vague, doubt creeps in. People start covering their backs instead of pushing forward. They play it safe, not because they lack courage, but because they lack direction. And a team without direction is just a group of individuals doing their own thing. Sun Tzu essentially says, if your people are confused, look in the mirror first. Don't blame the army, blame the general. And that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of leaders, because it means owning the failure before pointing fingers. It means accepting that the breakdown started at the top, not the bottom. So what's the takeaway here? Before you ever question your team's performance, question your own clarity. Were your instructions specific? Were they understood? Did you confirm understanding, or did you just talk and walk away? Sun Tzu makes it plain. A leader who cannot communicate clearly cannot lead effectively, period.
It doesn't matter how brilliant your strategy is. If your people don't understand it, it's worthless. Clarity isn't a nice to have. He treats it as a weapon, one of the most powerful a leader can carry. And honestly, most leaders never sharpen it.
Now, let's talk about something Sun Tzu valued almost above everything else: speed. Not recklessness, not rushing, speed. There's a massive difference, and Sun Tzu draws that line very carefully. He argues that the value of war, or any competitive endeavor, lies in a swift victory, not a prolonged one. He warns that when conflict drags on, resources drain, morale drops, and the whole operation starts to rot from the inside. Doesn't matter how strong you are, time is the silent killer. And that idea, it applies way beyond the battlefield. Think about business. Think about decision-making in your own life. How many opportunities have died because someone took too long to act? How many projects failed, not because the plan was bad, but because it was executed too slowly? Sun Tzu would look at that and say, yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about. He points out that no nation has ever benefited from prolonged warfare, ever. And if you translate that to modern terms, no company has ever thrived by dragging out a product launch. No leader has ever gained an edge by overthinking every single move. At some point, analysis becomes paralysis, and paralysis is defeat in slow motion. But here's the nuance, and this is important. Sun Tzu isn't saying just be fast and sloppy. Not at all. He's saying prepare thoroughly, then execute without hesitation. The speed he's talking about comes after the planning. It's the speed of action once the direction is set. You think deeply, but you move quickly. And that combination, that's rare. Most people do one or the other. They either plan forever and never act, or they act impulsively without thinking. Sun Tzu says, no, you need both. But once the thinking is done, go. Don't linger. Don't wait for the perfect moment. The perfect moment doesn't exist. He also warns about the hidden cost of delay. It's not just about wasted time, it's about what happens to your people. When things drag on, energy fades, enthusiasm dies. The sharp edge your team once had, it dulls. And a dull team, no matter how large, loses to a smaller, faster, sharper one. So speed, in Sun Tzu's framework, isn't just a tactical advantage. It's a morale advantage. It's a psychological advantage. A fast-moving force keeps the enemy off balance. They can't predict you. They can't prepare for you. You're already 3 steps ahead while they're still reacting to step 1. And that brings up something really practical. Sun Tzu argues that a good enough plan executed today beats a perfect plan executed next week. Because while you're polishing your strategy to perfection, your competitor has already moved. Your window has already closed. Your people have already lost their edge. Speed protects momentum, and momentum, that's one of the hardest things to rebuild once you lose it. So the lesson here is simple but brutal. Don't confuse being careful with being slow. Preparation is smart. Hesitation is not. Sun Tzu makes that distinction razor sharp. Prepare like a general, but when it's time to move like a storm. Fast, decisive, unstoppable. That's what he means when he says speed is the essence. So we just talked about speed, moving fast, executing without hesitation. But here's where Sun Tzu flips the script on you. He argues that the actual battle, that's not where victory is decided. Victory is decided long before the first move is made. It's decided in the planning phase, in the preparation, in the quiet, unglamorous work that nobody sees.
And that's a punch in the gut for people who think success is all about showing up and performing in the moment. Sun Tzu puts it bluntly, the winning general calculates before the fight begins. The losing general calculates after. One has already done the math, the other is doing it on the fly. And doing math on the fly, in the middle of chaos, that's a recipe for disaster. But what does planning actually mean in his framework? It's not just sitting in a room drawing up a nice strategy on a whiteboard. No, Sun Tzu's version of planning is ruthless. It's about understanding the terrain, knowing your enemy, knowing yourself, assessing your strengths, your weaknesses, your resources. He warns that leaders who plan based on wishful thinking are already defeated. You don't plan based on what you hope will happen. You plan based on what's likely to happen, and you prepare for what could go wrong. That's the difference between a real plan and a fantasy. And here's what makes this idea so powerful. Sun Tzu argues that when planning is done right, execution becomes almost easy. Not effortless, but smooth, because you've already anticipated the obstacles. You've already thought through the scenarios. You've already prepared your responses. So when the moment comes, you're not scrambling. You're just following through on what you already mapped out. That's why he says the greatest victories look effortless from the outside. People see the result and think, wow, that was easy for them. But they don't see the hours of calculation behind it. They don't see the preparation, the research, the wargaming of every possible outcome. And this connects directly to leadership. Sun Tzu points out that a leader's most important work isn't done in front of the crowd. It's done behind closed doors. It's the meeting before the meeting. It's the strategy session that no one posts about on social media. It's the unglamorous grind of asking, what if this happens? What if that fails? What's our backup? Most leaders skip that part. They want to jump straight to action, straight to the exciting stuff. But Sun Tzu says that's backwards. Action without deep planning is just gambling, and gambling isn't strategy. So here's the real takeaway. If you're losing in execution, the problem probably didn't start in execution. It started way earlier. It started in the planning, or the lack of it. Sun Tzu makes this painfully clear. The battle is won or lost before it even begins. Your job as a leader isn't just to lead the charge. It's to make sure the charge has been thought through from every angle before anyone takes a single step. Plan like everything depends on it, because according to Sun Tzu, it does. Here's something Sun Tzu understood that a lot of modern leaders still haven't figured out. It doesn't matter how brilliant your strategy is. If your team isn't aligned with the mission, truly aligned, it falls apart every time. Sun Tzu argues that unity of purpose is one of the most critical factors in determining victory or defeat. He calls it the moral law, the idea that the people must be in complete agreement with their leader, so much so that they'll follow without hesitation, without fear, without doubt. And that word, agreement, is doing a lot of heavy lifting here, because he's not talking about blind obedience. He's not saying people should just shut up and follow orders. No, he's saying they need to believe in the mission. They need to feel it, understand it, see themselves as part of it. That's alignment. And that kind of alignment, you can't force it. You have to earn it. So how does a leader earn it? Sun Tzu points out that it starts with shared purpose. The team has to know clearly and deeply why they're doing what they're doing. Not just the what, not just the how, the why. Because when people understand the why, they don't need to be micromanaged. They make decisions on their own that serve the mission. They fill in the gaps without being told. They move as one, not because someone's watching, but because they genuinely care about the outcome. And here's the flip side, the warning. He warns that when there's a disconnect between the leader's vision and the team's understanding, you get friction, internal friction. And internal friction is more dangerous than any external enemy because it's invisible. It doesn't show up in reports or dashboards. It shows up in half-hearted effort, in quiet disengagement, in people doing the bare minimum and clocking out, mentally if not physically. Sun Tzu saw this thousands of years ago. A divided army loses, not because the enemy was stronger, but because they defeated themselves from within. And this goes deeper than just corporate team building exercises or motivational speeches. Sun Tzu argues that alignment requires the leader to genuinely care about the welfare of their people. You can't expect loyalty if you treat people like disposable resources. He makes that connection very directly. A general who cares for his soldiers like his own children, they will follow him into the deepest valleys. But a general who doesn't, they'll abandon him the moment things get hard. That's not soft leadership. That's strategic leadership. Sun Tzu frames caring for your people not as a nice thing to do, but as a tactical necessity. So what's the practical lesson here? Before you roll out your next big strategy, stop.
Ask yourself, does my team actually understand the mission? Do they believe in it? Do they feel like they're part of something that matters? Or are they just going through the motions? Because Sun Tzu makes this crystal clear. A small, aligned team will crush a large, fragmented one every single time. Alignment isn't a soft skill. He treats it as a force multiplier. And the leader who ignores it, they're building on sand.
Most people think leadership is about making the right decisions. And yeah, that matters. But Sun Tzu, he takes it a step further. He argues that even the right decision, made at the wrong time, is the wrong decision. Let that sink in for a second. Sun Tzu says, "He who knows when to fight and when not to fight will win. Not how to fight, when." That's the word he chooses, and it's deliberate. Because in his mind, timing isn't just one factor in leadership. It's the factor, the one that separates the great from the merely good. And here's where it gets really interesting. Sun Tzu doesn't talk about timing the way most people do. Most people think timing means being fast, acting quickly, jumping on opportunities, but he warns against that. He actually says the best leaders spend most of their time waiting. Not passively, not lazily, but strategically. They watch, they observe, they study the terrain, the competition, the conditions, and they hold back until the moment is right. He compares it to a falcon. The quality of decision is like the well-timed swoop of a falcon, which enables it to strike and destroy its victim. That image is everything. A falcon doesn't just dive at anything that moves. It circles, it waits, it picks its moment with terrifying precision. And when it strikes, it's over in an instant. That's what Sun Tzu wants from a leader. Not recklessness disguised as boldness, precision. So what does this look like in practice? Sun Tzu points out that a great leader appears at points which the enemy must hasten to defend, and move swiftly to places where you are not expected. In other words, you don't announce your moves. You don't telegraph your intentions. You wait until everyone else is off balance, and then you act decisively, without hesitation. But here's the trap, and Sun Tzu is very clear about this. Waiting is hard, really hard, because when you're waiting, people around you start to doubt. They question your leadership. They wonder why you're not doing something, anything. And the temptation, the very human temptation, is to act just to prove you're in charge, just to show you're doing something. Sun Tzu warns that this is exactly how leaders destroy themselves. Action for the sake of action, movement without purpose. He calls it one of the most dangerous mistakes a leader can make, Because once you move too early, you've shown your hand, you've committed resources, you've lost the element of surprise, and now you're reacting instead of leading.
The real discipline of leadership, according to Sun Tzu, isn't in the action, it's in the restraint. It's in having the patience to sit still when everything inside you is screaming to move. And then, only then, when the conditions align, when the timing is right, you strike with everything you've got. No hesitation, no second guessing, just one clean, decisive move. That's the art of timing, not speed, not urgency, precision and patience working together. And Sun Tzu argues that the leader who masters this is nearly impossible to defeat. Here's something most people get wrong about leadership. They think a strong leader fights every battle, stands their ground no matter what, never backs down. Sun Tzu disagrees completely. He argues that the greatest leaders are the ones who know which battles to avoid. He says, he will win who knows when to fight and when not to fight. And notice, he puts when not to fight right there, equal weight, same sentence. Because in his mind, retreat isn't weakness, it's strategy. And that's a hard pill to swallow, especially today. We live in a culture that glorifies grinding it out, pushing through, never quitting. But Sun Tzu looks at that mindset and says, that's how you lose everything. Not because persistence is bad, but because blind persistence, fighting every fight just because it's in front of you, drains your resources, exhausts your people, and leaves you vulnerable when the real battle comes. He puts it bluntly. There is no instance of a nation benefiting from prolonged warfare. None. Zero. Not one example in history. And he's right. Think about it. Every empire, every organization, every leader who tried to fight on every front at once eventually collapsed. Not because they weren't strong, but because they spread themselves too thin. So how does a leader decide? What's the filter? Sun Tzu lays it out pretty clearly. He says you fight when you have a clear advantage, when the conditions favor you, when you've done the preparation, studied the terrain, and you know, not hope, not guess, you know you can win. And if those conditions aren't met, you pull back, you regroup, you wait for a better position. He warns against letting ego drive the decision. That's the real enemy here, not the opponent across from you. It's your own pride whispering, you can't walk away. People will think you're weak. Sun Tzu says a leader who fights out of anger or pride has already lost because they're no longer making strategic decisions, they're making emotional ones. And emotions on the battlefield, they get people killed. But here's the part most people miss. Sun Tzu doesn't see retreat as the end. He sees it as a repositioning, a setup. You fall back not because you've given up, but because you're choosing a better ground to fight from. You're conserving energy. You're letting the other side overextend. And when they do, when they get sloppy, when they get cocky because they think you've quit, that's when you come back, harder. He points out that the clever combatant imposes his will on the enemy, but does not allow the enemy's will to be imposed on him. That's what choosing your battles is really about. Control. You decide where the fight happens. You decide when it happens. And if the current fight doesn't serve your larger goal, you walk away, without apology. The leader who fights every battle wins some of them, sure. But the leader who chooses the right battles, Sun Tzu argues that leader wins the war. And at the end of the day, that's the only thing that matters. Most leaders rush into decisions. They see a problem, they react. They see an opportunity, they jump.
And sometimes it works out, but Sun Tzu says that's not leadership, that's gambling. He argues that before any leader makes a move, any move, they need to assess 5 critical factors. 5. Not 3, not 10, 5.
And he's very specific about what they are. The first factor, he calls it the moral law, and this one's huge. Sun Tzu says the moral law is about alignment. Are the people with you? Do they believe in what you're doing? Do they trust you enough to follow you into danger without hesitation? Because if they don't, if there's a disconnect between the leader and the people, nothing else matters. You can have the best strategy in the world, doesn't matter. Without alignment, you're leading an army that doesn't want to be led. The second factor is heaven. Now, he's not being spiritual here. He's talking about timing, seasons, conditions. The forces outside your control. Sun Tzu warns that a leader who ignores the conditions around them, the market, the climate, the mood of the moment, is fighting against reality, and reality always wins. Third, Earth. This is about terrain, your environment, the ground you're standing on. Sun Tzu says a great leader studies the landscape obsessively. Where are the advantages? Where are the dangers? What's the high ground, and who holds it? He points out that the leader who understands their terrain better than anyone else has already won half the battle before it even starts. The fourth factor is the commander, and this is where it gets personal. Sun Tzu says the leader themselves must possess 5 qualities: wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, and strictness. Not just 1 or 2, all 5. Because a leader who's wise but not courageous will hesitate. A leader who's courageous but not wise will be reckless. A leader who's strict but lacks benevolence will be feared but never followed. Not really. He argues that these qualities have to work together, like a system. Remove one, and the whole thing breaks down. And the fifth factor? Method and discipline. The boring stuff. The logistics, the structure, the systems that keep everything running. Sun Tzu says most people overlook this one because it's not flashy, it's not exciting. But he warns, an army without discipline is just a mob, and a mob doesn't win wars. Organization does. Preparation does. The unsexy, behind-the-scenes work that nobody talks about, that's what holds everything together. So here's the real insight. Sun Tzu doesn't present these 5 factors as a checklist you glance at once and move on. He says a leader must constantly evaluate them, before every decision, before every action. Because conditions change, people change, the terrain shifts, and the leader who assessed things correctly last month might be completely wrong today. He argues that victory is determined before the battle even begins, not during, before. By the leader who sat down, studied these 5 factors honestly, brutally honestly, and made their decision based on reality. Not hope, not ego, not pressure from the people around them. Reality. That's what Sun Tzu demands, and the leaders who give him that, they rarely lose. Sun Tzu doesn't view leadership as some mystical personality trait. He views it as a structure, a distinct engineered mental state. He argues that a leader isn't born, a leader is built. And the blueprint? It's specific. He lists 5 non-negotiable virtues that make up the commander: wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, strictness. Now, pause for a second. That sounds like a generic grocery list of good guy traits, right? But that's where people get it wrong. Sun Tzu is a pragmatist, not a moralist. He defines these things differently. They aren't about being a nice person. They're about effectiveness. Take wisdom. Sun Tzu places this first for a reason. He argues that before a leader can direct others, they must understand the landscape. But he's not talking about book smarts or academic theory. He's talking about calculation. He says a leader must be able to see the subtle changes in circumstances before they become obvious disasters. It's the ability to anticipate. If a commander cannot calculate the odds, Sun Tzu warns, they are just gambling with people's lives.
Then there's sincerity, or in some translations, trustworthiness. This is the glue. He points out that authority doesn't come from the rank on your shoulder, it comes from the reliability of your word. He insists that rewards and punishments must be clear and transparent. If you say you're going to do something, you do it. No ambiguity. He argues that if the troops don't trust the commander's promises of reward, or if they don't fear the certainty of punishment, the chain of command dissolves. It's binary. You are either credible or you are finished.
Next, benevolence. Here's where it gets nuanced. Sun Tzu says you must treat your soldiers like your own beloved sons. If you do, they will follow you into the deepest valley. He demands a genuine concern for their well-being. You have to care if they eat. You have to care if they're cold. But, and this is a massive but, he warns against the excess of this. He explicitly states that if you are too benevolent, the troops become like spoiled children. They become useless. They can't be led. So he argues for a paradox. Love them, but do not coddle them.
That leads directly into strictness. He pairs benevolence with discipline. He says laws must be enforced without hesitation. It's not about cruelty, it's about order. Sun Tzu points out that a disorganized army is essentially already defeated. He argues that strictness is what allows 1,000 people to move as one single entity. Without this, you don't have an army, you have a mob. And finally, courage. This isn't about being the loudest guy in the room or charging blindly into fire. Sun Tzu actually warns against reckless bravery. He calls it a liability. Instead, he defines courage as the ability to seize opportunity. It's decision-making under pressure. He argues that a leader must be decisive when the window of victory opens, even if the odds look murky. But here is the real aha moment in his analysis. Sun Tzu warns that possessing just one of these is a trap. It's fatal. He breaks it down like this. If a general is only courageous, they will be rash and get killed. If they are only benevolent, they will be hesitant and weak. If they are only strict, they will be cruel and lose the loyalty of their team. If they are only wise, they might overthink and delay. And if they rely too much on sincerity, they can be easily deceived by the enemy. So the takeaway isn't just to have these virtues. Sun Tzu argues you must balance them. You have to hold these opposing forces in tension. You need the strictness to punish, but the benevolence to care. The wisdom to plan, but the courage to execute. It's a juggling act. And according to Sun Tzu, dropping the ball on any single one of them creates a crack in the armor that the enemy will inevitably exploit. Most people think leadership is about being the strongest force in the room, about overpowering the competition, going head-to-head, matching strength with strength. Sun Tzu says that's exactly how you lose. He makes one of the most counterintuitive arguments in the entire book. He says a great leader never attacks where the enemy is strong. Never. You don't go where the walls are thickest. You don't charge into the heart of a well-defended position. Instead, you go around it. You find the crack, the gap, the soft spot no one's watching. He puts it like this. An army may be likened to water, for just as flowing water avoids the heights and hastens to the lowlands, so an army avoids strength and strikes weakness. And that comparison to water, it's not random. It's everything. Water doesn't try to push through a mountain. It flows around it.
It finds the path of least resistance, and over time, it carves through rock, not with brute force, with patience, with direction, with relentless, quiet pressure applied exactly where it matters. Sun Tzu argues that a real leader thinks the same way. You don't waste your resources hammering at a competitor's biggest advantage. That's ego talking. That's pride. And pride in strategy, it gets people destroyed.
So what does a smart leader do? He studies, he watches, he waits. He figures out where the opposition is overextended, where they're distracted, where they've left a gap because they assumed nobody would look there. And then, that's where he moves. Fast, decisive, with everything he's got.
Sun Tzu warns that most leaders fail here because they're obsessed with their own strength. They spend all their time thinking about what they can do, and almost no time studying what the enemy can't do. But the ones who win, they flip it. They become obsessed with the other side's weaknesses. They map them out, they probe them, and when the moment's right, they strike exactly there.
And here's what makes this so powerful in leadership. It's not just about war, it's about life, business, negotiation, every single competitive situation you'll ever be in. Think about it. Why would you compete in someone else's arena? Why would you play a game where they set the rules, they have the advantage, and they're expecting you? That's not strategy, that's stubbornness.
Sun Tzu argues that the smartest leaders redefine the battlefield entirely. They don't accept the fight they're given. They choose the fight they can win, and they do that by avoiding what's strong and attacking what's weak. He points out something else that's easy to miss. Strength and weakness aren't fixed, they shift. What's strong today might be weak tomorrow. A leader who understands this is always watching, always adapting, always repositioning, like water. But here's the hard truth. This takes discipline. It takes the kind of self-control that most people just don't have. Because when you see your enemy right in front of you, everything in you wants to charge, to meet force with force, to prove something. Sun Tzu says, don't. That impulse, that's the trap. The real power isn't in the attack everyone sees coming. It's in the one nobody expected. So here's where it all comes together. Throughout the art of war, Sun Tzu draws a very clear line between two types of leaders, the strong general and the wise general. And most people assume they're the same thing. They're not even close. The strong general is impressive. He's bold, he's aggressive, he charges in, takes the hill, wins the battle, and everyone cheers. He looks like a leader. He sounds like a leader. But Sun Tzu argues that's not the leader who wins the war. The wise general? Nobody notices him, and that's the point. Sun Tzu says the greatest victories are the ones that look easy, the ones where people shrug and say, well, that wasn't that hard. Because the wise general already did the work before the fight even started. He planned, he positioned, he understood the terrain, the enemy, the timing, everything. By the time the battle comes, it's almost boring. The outcome was decided long before the first move. And here's the part that messes with people. Sun Tzu argues that the wise general doesn't get celebrated. He doesn't get the glory, because no one sees what he prevented. No one applauds the disaster that never happened, the crisis that was avoided, the war that was won without a single dramatic moment. But the strong general, he gets all the attention because his victories are loud, chaotic, dramatic. People love that. They tell stories about it. They build legends around it. Sun Tzu warns, don't be seduced by that. The drama means something went wrong. It means the leader didn't see it coming, didn't prepare, didn't position, And now he's scrambling, fighting his way out of a situation he should have never been in. He puts it bluntly, to win 100 victories in 100 battles is not the acme of skill. To subdue the enemy without fighting is the acme of skill. Read that again. The highest form of leadership isn't winning every fight. It's making the fight unnecessary.
And that right there is what separates Sun Tzu's philosophy from almost every other leadership framework out there. He's not telling you to be tougher. He's not telling you to grind harder. He's telling you to be smarter, to see further, to move before everyone else even knows the game has started. So what does this mean for you? Whether you're leading a team, running a business, or just trying to navigate your own life, the lesson is the same. Stop chasing the appearance of strength. Stop trying to prove you can take the hit. Start thinking about how to never get hit in the first place. Sun Tzu argues that real leadership is invisible. It's quiet. It's the decision made months ago that nobody remembers. The conversation that prevented the crisis. The repositioning that made the competition irrelevant.
The strong general fights and wins. The wise general wins and never has to fight. And if you've been paying attention to everything Sun Tzu teaches, that's not just a nice idea. That's the whole game.